Tze Yong lost for the first time in 2025. Kunlavut Vitidsarn became the world number one. A Korean pair won the women's doubles for the first time in 34 years. And Chia and Tze Ying reached their fourth consecutive final, ending the tournament with one of the best matches. I'll be talking about all of that and much more in this week's episode of Beckman's Breakdown, the show where I take a look at all of the World Tour events from Super 500 up to Super 1000, including the majors and the team events. This week was the Singapore Open Super 750. The Singapore Open is one of the trickiest venues for players to play in, and that's for the simple reason that the drift is incredibly pronounced. If you're unsure of what drift is, then basically it's the air currents within a venue that can affect the shuttle's flight path. A shuttlecock is incredibly light, so it doesn't take much for it to be affected. And for whatever reason, inside the Singapore Open, it's always been, historically, as long as I can remember, been one of the worst, one of the most difficult for players to play in. And it's for that reason that if you listen to any of the players' interviews or read articles where there's excerpts from their interviews, number of times, 9 times out of 10, you're going to hear the mention of this player won, or I didn't play particularly well, or I lost because I wasn't able to handle the conditions very well. So-and-so beat me because they played the conditions better. It's almost mentioned in every single interview. Honestly, I don't think I can think of one interview where it wasn't mentioned. As always, now, before we get into the main part of the episode, is I am wearing, again, some Beckman's Breakdown merchandise. If you like it and you want to buy it, it would definitely help the channel. If you were to do that, then click the link in the description. There's still the offer of 20% off, and it's free worldwide shipping. Obviously, I have shirts, I have hoodies, hats, water bottles. It's kind of the YouTube influencer starter pack, I guess you could call it, of merchandise. But yeah, if you like what you see, you want to help the channel and you want to rep some Beckman's Breakdown merchandise, then yeah, click the link in the description and that'll take you right to where you can buy it. Okay, so anyway, on with the show. Going to get into the main topics now. Although the first one that I want to talk about is more of an update. It doesn't have a direct link to the Singapore Open, but I still want to talk about it, so let's get into it, everyone. Okay, so I have some unfortunate news and an unfortunate update, and it's to do with Tze Yong. So if you watched last week's video, you'll know that at this Malaysia Masters, Tze Yong against Kalong Angus in his first round match, moved awkwardly and hurt his right knee and had to retire from the match. Now, it was reported afterwards that it was just a knee strain, and I was desperately hopeful that that would be all it was. However, it does seem likely now. There has been, as far as I can see, no official statement from BAM, but I've had a number of comments from people online throughout this week, and I've seen multiple news articles as well, angling at the fact that it's possibly an ACL injury, and actually he might even require surgery. So if that is the case, obviously, we'll probably wait to see the official release from BAM, but it seems incredibly likely there wouldn't be this many people reporting in it, this many people individually commenting on this situation or giving me updates if there wasn't quite a lot of truth to it. So it seems like Tze Yong's going to be out even longer. If it is ACL and requires surgery, that is a minimum 6 months, if not a year, to recover from. So devastating news, heartbreaking for Tze Yong. He's just come back from back injury, back surgery that left him out for a whole year. He's been back, what, 3 tournaments, and now it looks like he might be out for another year. You know, this is going to be incredibly difficult to come back from. Even if he had the ACL injury and that was his first one, it would be difficult to come back from. But the fact that he's going to have this on top of just coming back from back surgery or back injury is absolutely devastating and going to be really difficult, not just physically, but I think psychologically is going to be really hard for him. The other thing that's quite sad for him is that he's already used up his protected ranking on the injury that he had with his back. You can only have that once every 2 years, so the fact that he's already used that, so he can't have that, so his ranking is going to absolutely plummet. He's going to have to start from rock bottom, and when I say that, it's going to be like qualifying in international series, in international challenge events. Yeah, no, I just want to wish him a very speedy recovery. It's like history has repeated itself. You know, last year with his back, last year with his back, and the reports early were that it wasn't that major, that he would be back relatively soon, only for it to happen that it require surgery and he'd be out for a long time. Seems it's repeated itself, but this time with his knee. The reports were that it was a knee strain, 2 to 4 weeks, but now it seems that it's actually far more serious and it's an ACL injury and he'll be out for 6 months to a year. That is, yeah, I can't repeat myself enough. That is absolutely devastating. I love watching Tze Yong play, and I also just, beyond that, this is a young badminton player's career on the line here. Badminton has clearly been a part of his life from when he was a very young kid. This is something that he's dreamed of doing and being successful in, and he had all the tools to be successful. And so for now to be on the sidelines again in such short succession, I mean, that's hard, that's tough. I just wish him nothing but the best, and I hope that he can get the support he needs, not just to recover physically, but mentally too. And I really hope that this is the end of his bad luck, and that he can come back and return to the courts and do what he does best and be a really good badminton player. So yeah, Tze Yong, it's unlikely that you watch these videos, but I hope you can feel the love. And yeah, it's a sad news, just like the last episode, to kick off on such a sour note. But yeah, no, I felt that it was important that I gave everyone this little bit of an update. So first topic in regards to the Singapore Open, and I'm left with more questions on this one, more confusion, and it's to do with the Chinese mixed doubles. In the last episode, I asked a few questions. I was a little bit unsure of the reasoning and the rationale behind this, but that's that the Chinese put in their top 2 mixed doubles pairs, so Feng Yanze and Wang Dongping, and Zhang Zhengbang and Wei Yaxin, in both Super 500s, knowing full well that it was going to be a 750 and a 1000 right after. 4 tournaments back-to-back is incredibly hard to do, especially if you want to be successful in all of them. We've seen a number of the top players, and this is including the Chinese, that have only played one of the 500s, and then obviously they're going to play the 750 in Singapore and the 1000, which is going to come up this week in Indonesia. So it kind of left me a little bit confused as to why the Chinese, it was in their mixed doubles, which is probably one of their strongest disciplines, opted to play both. That confusion has led to even more confusion in the fact that for the Singapore Open and the Indonesia Open, they've now split their top 2 pairs up again and gone back with the pairs that played at the All England. So that's Feng Yanze and Wei Yaxin, and the other pair, Zhang Zhengbang and Wang Dongping, aren't even playing in the Singapore Open or the Indonesia Open. So I'm kind of confused as to A, why did they split them up again, when it seems that the split was to kind of give them maybe a little bit of a break from each other, to get a fresh perspective, maybe to possibly see if there was a different pair that worked really well. But they came back into their original pairings, and especially Feng Yanze and Wang Dongping were doing really well. They went unbeaten at the Sudirman Cup and helped China defend their title, and then they won both the 500s. So I'm left kind of confused as to why they split them up again for the even more important tournaments, knowing full well, for me, that those 750 1000s would give really important points to a number of pairs, obviously with the further eye on the World Championships in August, which is not too far away. So I'm kind of confused, really confused actually, as to the rationale behind this decision. So why did they then resplit the pairs, and then why do they only enter one of them? Can anyone in my comment section shed any light on this? Was it this pair was entered, they entered this Feng and Wei into these tournaments before they had put Feng and Wang back together, but then they would have had to enter Feng and Wang earlier than that, so they would have known. I'm really honestly confused. Or are they trying to maybe keep it open as to who they pick for the World Championships? So, you know, Feng and Wang are already kind of world number 1 or world number 2, as are the other pair, Zhang and Wei. But maybe they saw Feng and Wei as a potential, and so they wanted to give them the 750 1000s to get their points up, so that they could also get up into the world rank. Honestly, whatever thing I try to think of as a reason for this, I'm left with even more questions. So I'm going to turn this over to you. Can any of you explain this away? I'm completely in the dark and confused about all of this. and it doesn't make sense. Also, the last thing is also the 751,000s. Obviously, China will also want to do well, like they always do in every single tournament. So the fact they're not even putting in both pairs to potentially win the tournament, it's not that Feng and Wei can't do well. They didn't do well in this Singapore Open, but they could obviously come back and do really well in Indonesia this week. They could very well win it. But still, you're kind of running the risk. You're taking it, you're not sending one of the pairs, and yeah. I'm going around in circles here because I am just very confused. I'm trying to, in my head now, and I've been doing this all week, trying to think of a reason as to why this was done, and I'm just still confused as ever. So if you do know anything at all, get in the comments and let me know, because I'm confused as hell. Okay, so one of the big matches from the Singapore Open that I think when people saw the draw, when I saw the draw, we're really looking forward to, was a potential quarterfinal match between Tze Yong, the world and Olympic champion and world #1, and Chen Yufei, the former Olympic champion, former world #1, and a player who's been on the comeback trail as of late, and playing really well and getting back in. And I think the reason why people are so excited is not only is this the last two Olympic winners playing off against each other, but realistically, I think a lot of people think the only player that can stop Tze Yong, maybe Wang is in this conversation as well. I would definitely include her, and maybe a couple of others on their day. But Chen Yufei seems to be realistically the player that could stop Tze Yong, and at this Singapore Open, she was able to prove that correctly, as she gave Tze Yong her first loss of 2025. But yeah, no, the reason I want to do this section on this match alone is because like I said, it was a very exciting and interesting match. But it's not just because Tze Yong lost her first match of the year, but it was also what Chen Yufei did to do that. What did she do so well? And I think it plays into what I noticed of Chen Yufei when she won the tournament in Thailand, and little things that I just noticed since she's come back. And I think it plays into potential matches that we might see from Tze Yong and Chen Yufei in the future. So I think when it came to this match, for me, there were a couple of things. One was, and this plays into what I said in the introduction, and it's something that both Chen Yufei and Tze Yong admitted afterwards, that is that Chen Yufei played the conditions far better. She was incredibly solid in this match. She had a really good feel on court, and just Tze Yong was a little bit off. I noticed that she was forcing a few things. So when she went for her big smashes, she missed them by quite a big margin, which for me is a real sign when a player is just forcing the issue a bit. Maybe they're feeling the pressure of the other player inside the net feeling incredibly solid. That's something that usually players end up doing when they're playing Tze Yong, but Tze Yong got a little bit of her own medicine there by Chen Yufei. So yeah, Chen Yufei, the first thing, we all know that she's incredibly solid and a very good rallier, and she can nullify a lot of players' good stuff, good strengths, and kind of play into their weaknesses, and she was able to do that incredibly well against Tze Yong. However, that alone is not enough to beat a player of Tze Yong's quality. There must have been something else. And for me, like I alluded to in the last episode of Beckman's Breakdown, where I said Chen Yufei's attack has certainly improved, or she's just trying to use her attack a lot more, and it came into the forefront in this match, for me in a very specific way. I felt, and this was especially the case in the first game, and I'll give you a reason as to why I think that, but Chen Yufei had a lot of success attacking Tze Yong's forehand. For whatever reason, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I do believe that defending on the forehand is more difficult than the backhand. Although you have to twist across yourself on the backhand, just naturally being able to get down low into that corner is actually a lot easier than the forehand. Most players, men's singles and women's singles, a weak spot or an area that most players are slower to is not just the forehand smash corner, so the forehand side, but the forehand front court. The reason why I think it happened more in the first game is because of the drift. When Chen Yufei started, she was on the nearer side, and the drift was going, as you looked at it, from right to left in that match. So when Chen Yufei was able to smash down to Tze Yong's forehand, not only did the drift take it out further to the line, but that meant that when Tze Yong reached it, she had to hit it back into the court, which actually requires a to being there in a slightly better position. If you're a little late and you only play it straight, the drift will take it outwards. So not only did the drift help Chen Yufei's smash go out further to the line, but it also meant it's more difficult for Tze Yong to angle it back into the court. In the second game, obviously that wasn't, the drift would take it the other way, but it was still an effective corner. Another thing in regards to this, which is, I felt Chen Yufei did incredibly well in regards to the attack and using that forehand side, is that I think if she had overused it, Tze Yong would have been able to come up with a counter. One of Tze Yong's best qualities is being able to figure out what her opponents are doing to her to, you know, get her into the bad positions. And as a result, she's able to then either start to read those situations and also come up with a counter. That's something that not many players are able to do, but Tze Yong does incredibly well. Again, I'll give you another example of a player who's very good at that, and that's Liang. I think I've told this story before, but there was a match, I think it might have been at the Swiss Open, where Peter Gader beat Liang. And Kenneth Jonasson, who was just, I think at the time, retiring, was on the coaching bench and helping. I remember him telling me this, is that Peter Gader, in that match, if he hadn't found a tactic that worked, even if after 5-6 rallies, he'd have to change it. Because he knew that if he didn't, Liang would get wise to it and be able to find a counter to it, and then it would be no longer effective. So Gader knew that he could win a few points on a tactic for 5-6 rallies, change it up, do another one, but then as a result could return to it later. And that's quite an important point, because that's what Chen Yufei did, I think, very well against Tze Yong. She found that the forehand corner was working well, but then you would notice a few points where she would attack the body or over to the backhand side. Even if it meant she wasn't winning as many points, or say in a run of 5 points, only be winning 3-2 or even be 3-2 down, she knew that if she kept working on that corner, when she went back to the forehand, which was working, she would then get a lot more points in return. So yeah, I think Chen Yufei did that absolutely brilliantly. A bit more attacking, exposed that forehand side. On top of that, with the attack, obviously, to do this well, you have to be accurate, and Chen Yufei was accurate, and that plays into what I said first, is that she was able to play the conditions incredibly well, something that both Chen Yufei and Tze Yong admitted afterwards. Yeah, no, an incredibly impressive performance. I was a little bit surprised. I did do a post on Instagram the day before the match, where I kind of obviously still had Tze Yong as the favourite, not just because she'd beaten Chen Yufei twice earlier this year. I knew that it'd be a much closer contest because Chen Yufei's improvement rate over the last few tournaments, she's been getting better and better, her confidence is getting higher, etc. But I honestly was quite surprised that not only did she win, but she won so convincingly. I do think Tze Yong had a bit of a bad day. That is in no small part, like I just said, to Chen Yufei playing a really brilliant match. Tze Yong didn't look particularly settled, she didn't look particularly comfortable, but I have no doubt that a player like Tze Yong could come back in Indonesia Open with a real point to prove and kind of, you know, make up for that loss. But yeah, no, is there anything else that I've written in my notes about this match? I don't think there's anything in terms of what I think that actually happened in the match. Chen Yufei, in her post-match interview, did say that she felt she can now compete, and that this was a big win. I think she said that there had been a lot of doubts over her because she hadn't been able to beat Tze Yong in so many times, and that also went towards kind of Chinese badminton, Chinese women's singles as a whole. And so being able to finally get that win over Tze Yong was absolutely huge. And obviously Chen Yufei within the tournament, it gave her a lot of confidence as she went on to win the whole tournament, defeating Han Yue in a really tough semi-final, and then having a very one-sided final against Wang Ziyi. What this does mean is obviously Chen Yufei has won 4 titles in a row. No, 3 titles. 3 titles. No, is it 4? She's won a number of titles in a row. Sorry, I've written 4, but for some reason I'm doubting myself now. And I think for me, this builds some nice excitement going into not just the Indonesia Open this week, where I think the draw, if it pans out, Chen Yufei and Tze Yong would actually face in the final. I think they are in opposite halves. But looking a little further ahead, the World Championships, for me, this builds a lot of excitement. And I think with Chen Yufei, if she can do really well in Indonesia as well, and then I think she's going to play one of the 500s before Japan and China, or after it before the World Championships. I think she's really making a gunning to get her ranking up back into the top 4, possibly 2 behind Tze Yong, and put herself in a great position to get back amongst the medals and possibly win her first world title. Yeah, no, it's for me, it brought a little bit more excitement to that event, to the World Championships, because up until this point, whilst there were players that could beat Tze Yong, it felt that, you know, Tze Yong was going to be almost untouchable this year. She had that kind of feeling about her, that aura. And this win is slightly not that. Not that I think Tze Yong can't go on to go and win every remaining tournament, become a 2-time world champion, etc., etc. But it just, because there's now there's a bit more excitement going into it. Yeah, I think another thing that branches off this that I can talk about in this section is that Chinese women's singles is kind of having a resurgence in terms of their dominance. They've now got 3 really good players. I said, obviously, Chen Yufei, Wang and Han Yue. It was another all-Chinese final this week. 3 Chinese players in the semi-finals. And I think that the way that women's singles is a little less diverse than it was, you know, 5-6 years ago, or even a few years ago, sorry. And it seems that China have come out of this with, 3 players that can dominate a little bit. Obviously, you have Tze Yong to kind of keep a little bit of that at bay, and I think Yamaguchi showed this week that she's still got the game to be able to kind of be amongst that. But it does seem that outside of that, yeah, there are players that can disrupt and beat these Chinese players. But if you had to be quite honest, every single tournament, you'd be surprised if not 2 or even all 3 of those Chinese players were to get into the semi-finals. And I think we might see a number more all China finals at events like this, in all honesty. So yeah, no. Whether that's a good thing or not, I'm not so sure. Anyway, back to Chen Yufei. Like I said, let's just wrap this section up by saying that against Tze Yong, she was absolutely fantastic. She was fantastic all week, but she definitely had her best performance of the week. Even though she won the final 11-11 against Wang Ziyi, the best match that she played all week was undoubtedly her one against Tze Yong, and it's for the reasons that I've laid out. Okay, so in this next section, before we kind of move on to more of the players and pairs that were involved in the finals, there's some honourable mentions that I want to make, and there's 3 in particular. These aren't the only 3, but these are 3 that I think, one of them is from this tournament alone, and the other 2 are actually are about players or pairs that I've noticed over the last few tournaments that I just want to give a little bit of time to in this video. So the first one is the Popov Brothers. Obviously in the Singapore Open, Christo Popov made the semi-finals, had an absolutely fantastic tournament. He beat Anders Antonsen in the first round, and then he beat, I can't remember who he beat in the second round, but it was another good win, I'm pretty sure. And then in the quarterfinals, he beat the home hero, Lo Kien Yu. Yeah, he had an absolutely fantastic tournament. I think 2 key areas where he was really good were his net play, and I felt his attack and follow-ups were absolutely sublime. The kind of stuff that you need to do in halls like this, you need to be quite attacking minded. You need to look to try and finish your points and dominate the front of the court, and he did those in both those things. He controlled the net. Even if players were trying to net back, he was quite willing on both sides to play net yet again, and I felt he attacked with good variety, good angles, good pace, good accuracy, and then he followed them up lightning quick. We know that he is a very fast player. But beyond that, I think one thing that I noticed with Christo Popov that gets a lot of comments is his footwork. It's not like the way he moves in terms of his actual footwork patterns are there's anything wrong with them, but I think a lot of people do comment on his quite pronounced split step. He almost jumps quite high in the air, whereas most players, especially men's singles, tend to just like drop and push, you know, kind of very efficient in that. He's quite pronounced. I did actually notice this week, and I've noticed it in previous tournaments, that has got a little bit less. And so I think maybe he's getting a little bit smoother, a little bit more efficient in his footwork, which is only going to be good in terms of his energy consumption and his efficiency around the court, because he is lightning quick with great attacks, and obviously being left-handed I do think does have his advantages. But yeah, no, he definitely seemed a little bit more efficient with his split step. It was a little bit less jumpy up and down. Now, I said Popov Brothers, it's not just Christo that impressed me. Obviously I wanted to start with him because he did do better in the Singapore Open, but his brother Tomo Jr., his older brother, also had a fantastic tournament. He was very unfortunate not to make it in all Popov Brother quarterfinal, as he probably should have beaten Loh Kin Yew in the second round. But he's had some great tournaments, some great play over the last couple of tournaments I've seen, and also some improvements, but in different areas, because they're completely different players. Tomo's right-handed and very tall, Christo is shorter and left-handed, so obviously they do play the game very differently. For me, Tomo just looks far more balanced on court, and I think he's improved his mobility around the court and his defense. Obviously, being very tall, you know, those kind of players can get twisted and turned out of position, and I think Tomo's done a great job of improving that. He's always reminded me a little bit of the way Kenneth Jonassen played. I remember Kenneth Jonassen coming on, and he wasn't the most agile player, but he was very strong in the hand, very strong in the wrist, and played with a lot of drive defenses. I think he was one of the first players to kind of start to do that a lot in the game. And I kind of see a lot of similarities with him and the way that Tomo Jr. Popov plays. Yeah, he hasn't got those results over the last few weeks that have been like mind-blowing. You know, he got to the quarterfinals, I believe, in the Malaysia Masters, second round in Singapore. But it's just the way, when I watched both Popov brothers, I was like, there's been some improvements here. And maybe France avoiding, not sending their top players to the Swimming Cup, it's paid off, because it gave them a little bit more training time. And you can see the benefits of that training. And obviously I can't also go without mentioning their doubles game has improved. Not only are they the European champions, which was a fantastic result, but here in Singapore, they almost beat Kim Won-ho and Seo Seung-jae in the first round. They were leading 19-18 in the third game, but unfortunately weren't able to close it out. That would have been an absolute, you know, the shock of the tournament, that would have been. But yeah, no, their game has just, it's always improving. France in general, wow, they're really doing a great job. And I just wanted, like I said, to mention that I have noticed some massive improvements in the Popov brothers, not just in Singapore, but actually in this Asia leg. And so, yeah, I wanted to mention them. Next one, again, it's another pair, or just a team, basically, that hasn't done particularly well. But I still think it's worth mentioning, and that's the Japanese men's doubles. For me, I want to talk mainly about Hoki and Kobayashi. Again, they haven't like set the world alight with the results they've done, but they put in some great performances. Obviously, they have done pretty well. Was it semi-finals last week? And was it second round here? I think they lost. Who did they lose to? Was it Aaron Chia and So Yik, actually, the eventual winners? But it's besides the point. The way that they've been playing has just shown signs. I know that Kobayashi had his issues with his knee, I'm pretty sure. They only came back at the Asia Championships, which wasn't long ago, but they've actually really been finding their feet, which is really good. And why I want to mention them as well is that I noticed behind their court, and I noticed him behind the court of the mixed doubles as well, and that's Lee Wan Hwa. Now, Lee Wan Hwa was a successful men's doubles player for Malaysia, and I think it's really good, and I think he's clearly having an effect on the players. A really positive one, both in the mixed doubles and the men's doubles. I'm not quite sure if he's involved. I don't think he's involved with the women's doubles. It seems like it's only the mixed and the men's doubles. And I think this is really good, definitely having a positive effect. You know, so you had Hoki and Kobayashi, they impressed me, and obviously you had a completely new pair reach the quarterfinals here, and that's Yuichi Shimagami and Sayaka Hibara in the mixed doubles. They were the pair that actually beat Watanabe and Matsutomo in the second round. So yeah, having a really positive effect, Lee Wan Hwa, and I think it's a great thing because, you know, Japan are going through some major changes. There's been structural change, not just for them losing Park Ju-bong as their head coach, but the way that it's run because of the whole financial issue. You know, there was those money embezzlement issues that happened a couple of years ago, or a few years ago now, and that's had some knock-on effect to the funding. So that's why we're seeing structural changes within Japanese badminton. And obviously we've had a lot of changes in the coaching, not just Park Ju-bong, but Jeremy Gan left and Tam Kin-her left. And it seems obviously they're sticking with Malaysian people bringing Lee Wan Hwa in. But no, really good. So I think this hopefully can kind of settle Japanese badminton. And we've seen their women's doubles come out this side looking very healthy in recent months, and women's singles looking promising. Men's singles as well. But the men's doubles as well, they've got some promising young pairs. And it's really good for me, like I started the section off with the Hoki and Kobayashi. I think they can come back and to be a very good pair again. They were showing some great signs. They've been playing some great badminton. Haven't quite, obviously, you know, made a final or won a tournament yet, but I think they're on the peripheries of doing something in one of the upcoming tournaments. I wouldn't be surprised if we see them in a final or winning a tournament before the end of the year, which would be great. And I think that would have to be attributed in some respects to Liang. So no, really good for Japanese men's doubles and mixed doubles as well. Moving on, last one, and this is the one that does a little bit tie towards having a great tournament in Singapore, and that's Rankireddy and Shetty, the Indian pair. They have had a lot of misfortune, I'd say, bad luck, and a lot of things going wrong for them ever since the Olympic Games. I'm not quite sure how long after it was, but Chirag Shetty injured his back, and that's an issue that has been rearing its ugly head a number of times. And I think even I had a couple of people say that even at the Singapore Open in the semi-finals that it slightly flared up again, but I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't like to commit fully to that, but there was definitely signs that maybe there was a little bit of an issue, not a major one, not enough to obviously stop them or stop them from playing well, but it definitely flared up a bit. But yeah, end of last year, Chirag Shetty's back injury started that kind of obviously stopped them from being able to compete consistently. Then in February, Rankireddy's father passed away from a cardiac arrest. Then March, Chirag Shetty's back injury flared up severely at the All England, meaning they had to withdraw and didn't play any of the tournaments after that. Then they were going to come back for the Sudirman Cup, and I thought they could play a really good role in India, potentially getting their first medal at that tournament, but then they didn't travel due to illness. I can't remember, someone did tell me what illness it was and who it affected. I think it might have been Rankireddy that was affected by that, but yeah, illness, and then we haven't seen them from in the rest of this Asia leg, I think also because of recovering from their illness, but also Chirag's back is still not 100%, but they came back at the Singapore Open and it was like they had never gone away. They impressed the hell out of me. I watched most of their early rounds up until the semi-finals, and they were attacking well, they were pushing up the court well. That organisation I think Matthias Bo brought into them was there, you know, the set pieces, all that kind of stuff. It was absolutely brilliant, and I was absolutely surprised and shocked when I heard that over the last month or 6 weeks they'd only trained like 10 days. They didn't show that at all. They were absolutely brilliant. And another thing, the fact they were able to reach semi-finals at this tournament after all of that. But then you have to consider the fact that historically the Singapore Open was a tournament they'd never really done particularly well in. So it was absolutely brilliant. In the semi-finals, they came up against the in-form pair, Rankireddy and Tze Ying, and this was always going to be a tough match because their head-to-heads against the Malaysians isn't great. They've always had a difficult time against that pair. And then add to the fact, not just all this stuff that had gone in before this tournament, but that the crowd were obviously heavily on Aaron and Tse's side. Being in Singapore, you know, just the south of Malaysia, it felt like a home crowd to them, and obviously that was going to lift them. But in that match, I felt the Indians did play a good game. The one thing that I think that wasn't quite as good was that, and although they won the first game, I noticed this as well in there, was that what really impressed me in the earlier rounds, what they were doing so well, was both players pushing up the court. And I think that was something that was really important for any of the men's doubles pairs to be successful. Was obviously getting on the attack, but that kind of, you could say that about any arena. But here it was about being able to both push up the court so hard, so much, because it was so difficult, even on the slower end, to get over a player and lift it over two players, especially Rankireddy and Shetty being so tall and so powerful that once they got into that side-by-side attacking formation and were pushing up, they were very difficult. And I felt players and pairs that did well this tournament also did that from a slightly defensive position. All the pairs that made the semis, that was the deciding factor for me, that both of them, not just one, but both were doing that so well. But in that semi-final, I felt they weren't pushing up the court as much. Shetty definitely got exposed a little bit. I think the Malaysians were able to kind of pick him out a little bit. And then I noticed that Rankireddy was kind of hanging back a little bit. When in the earlier rounds, there was half a chance that one of their opponents was taking it slightly late or in a not such a favourable position. They were right up there. He was right up there. And I just felt in that semi-finals, there was a bit of hesitance, and that just gave the Malaysians that little more breathing room. And part of that might have been just, I think, was the quality of the Malaysians. Their speed in their attack is something that was noticeably amazing throughout this tournament and something that was key in them winning the whole tournament. But their quality from there, I just don't think, even when they were slightly late, the Indians had no chance, even if they push up the court, to get anything away. And so maybe they were hanging back to kind of sacrifice a bit of that for control. But I do think that if the Indians wanted to win that game, they needed to push up the court a little bit more. They were a little bit hesitant, giving the Malaysians that little bit more breathing room, and were able to maintain their attack. And yeah, fair play to the Malaysians. Their attack was absolutely brilliant. I'm going to talk more about Aaron Chan Soyik a bit later when we get to the section on the finals. But yeah, no, I felt that was for me the key, the reason why I felt the Indians weren't able to win that match. Now, I did allude to the fact that a number of people have pointed out to me that, and I think even Rankireddy might have alluded to this in his post-match interview, that Shetty's back might have twinged a little bit, and maybe that's another reason why they weren't pushing up the court, or why Shetty was being picked on, or he was missing a few key shots at the net, is because maybe his mind was on his back, or he wasn't 100% comfortable as he was in the early rounds. But regardless, that was for me the main reason as to why they weren't able to win that match, or why the Malaysians were able to be successful. There's obviously other things, mainly which was on the behalf of how well the Malaysians played. But like I said, I'll get to that a little bit later. No, this was a fantastic tournament for the Indians. It was really good to see them back after everything they've been through. They were both obviously elated with their performance. They'd love to have won the semis and got to the final and done that and moved on, and even won the tournament. Obviously, all pairs want to do that. But I think they could take a lot of positives away, that they were able to play so well after such little training and such little preparation time. So it'll be interesting to see how they do in Indonesia. It's similar, Indonesia, in terms of the conditions and what you need to do to be successful. You need to be attacking, you need to dominate the net, and you need, at any time you need to push up the court, push up the court, push up the court. And they did that really well in Singapore. In the semi-final, it was a little bit down, but yeah, no, overall a fantastic tournament for them. It was a good welcome back, and hopefully, like I said with Tze Yong, that their bad luck and stuff is behind them, and they can now just push forward, start training more, start competing more, and really getting their feet back, because they are a very exciting pair to watch. And they also just bring, again, that level of diversity to the men's double discipline, that different style. And we want to, as a badminton fan, as a neutral fan myself, I love to see different types of way the game's played, and I really enjoy watching Rankireddy and Shetty when they're in full flow. And so yeah, no, it was great to see them play so well here in Singapore. Okay, so we have a new world #1 in the men's singles, Kunlavut Vitidsarn of Thailand. First Thai player to become world #1 in men's singles, but that's not his first ever first for Thailand. He was the first Thai player to reach an Olympic final, the first Thai men's singles player to become world champion. I think he was the first Thai player to be the world junior champion as well, and he's the only player to win 3 world junior titles in the boys singles as well. So at age 24, he has achieved a hell of a lot already. He reached that world #1 status by reaching the final. When he won his semi-final, it was confirmed that by the rankings, which will go out tomorrow as I record this on Tuesday, he would be in the world number spot, taking it from Chia, who obviously last year Chia won the Singapore Open and the Indonesia Open, so had a lot of points to defend, and he lost to his compatriot Wang in the first round, which opened the door for Kunlavut to become world #1. And not only did he walk through that door, he slammed it shut with his performance in the final, cementing his world #1 spot with an incredibly emphatic win over Wang, funnily enough the player who beat Chia in the first round. What I want to talk about in this section, there's not too much to talk about in the final. It was incredibly one-sided. I think Kunlavut was in an incredibly good playing mood, like he was all week. He won this tournament without dropping a single game. He's got incredible technical skills, so he was able to play the conditions, the difficult conditions, incredibly well. You know, we know that he can attack, he can defend, he can run. His skill set is always putting you on the back foot, even when he's rallying with you or playing what you could call a basic game. He I think if you're playing him, you're always on edge because he can just send you the wrong way at a moment's notice. And in the final, all of that was on display. Plus the fact that Liu Guangzhou was the complete opposite. He played all 3 game matches up until that point. And not that I think that he was overly fatigued. I think he had a bit of a bad day. Nothing was quite going for him. But yeah, he wasn't really able to get into making it a physical battle. But I think even if it had become a physical battle, that Kunlavut Vitidsarn probably still would have won. Because as we know, Kunlavut can play the physical matches. Let's not forget that world final, the World Championships that he won in 2023. But also, it's not just a matter of if you want to win by being physical, it's not just keeping the rallies going for longer and longer. That's one part of it, but it's being able to play the physical game where you're not working as hard or as your opponent, so you'll be able to control the majority of the rallies. And I think Liu Guangzhou would have struggled to have been in control of the majority for the reasons that I said. Kunlavut Vitidsarn's skill and technique and all that stuff enables him to control the shuttle far better in those difficult, windy conditions. I actually had a number of questions about Kunlavut Vitidsarn, and people were asking me, what's he changed, what's he's done differently. A number of people were angling at the fact that he was more attacking, etc. Is this a change in his tactics? To that I would say no. I think Kunlavut's a bit of a chameleon player. He can play a number of styles, and like I said, he's got incredibly good technique and skill set. So I think when he's playing in those slower halls, he will just run around. Won't run around. He will play the more controlling, less attacking game and rely on his skill set that way. But in a hall like this, and probably next week in Indonesia, where you need to be more attacking and take the initiative, because it's far harder to play a rallying game in such windy and tricky conditions, that he can then change his style to do that. I think another thing this brings up for Kunlavut Vitidsarn, a number of people will say that, yeah, he's a big player, big tournament player, Olympic finalist, 2-time world finalist and world champion. He won the Asia Championships as well. But consistently wise, he's not winning tournaments consistently. But I think what he's done, I think maybe that's a little bit harsh, because you don't become world #1 unless you are quite consistent. You have to have some level of consistency to your game. You just won't become world #1 that way. But also over the last, few tournaments, he's also won. He won the Asia Championships, he won the Thailand Open, now he's won the Singapore Open. That's 3 tournaments in a row that he's played, that he's won. So I think that shows a fantastic level of consistency, and kind of goes against that theory that he's just a big tournament player. I still don't think he's going to be like someone that's going to win 8-9 titles in a year. I don't think we're going to see him be that kind of player. We might see him go through little runs where he wins 2 or 3 in a row like this. And the reason I think we're seeing him do this now is that I think he is one of these players that seems to take a while to get his game up to like a really high point. And I think his main goal this year is definitely the World Championships. Obviously he wants to defend his title and potentially get to 3 world finals in a row. And so I think he's been training really, really hard to get his game back. And I think we're seeing kind of the starts of the fruits of that. On top of that, another reason why I think that, and why maybe we didn't see the most consistent Kunlavut in the beginning half of this year, or maybe the end of last year, is that I think after the Olympics, he got a lot of media attention. He is probably, I think, Thailand's biggest sports star right now. I think Anders Anderson made a joke about how many adverts he has on his Instagram page. And I think whilst, with all the best will in the world, that definitely would have taken away from his badminton just a little bit. And I think he's had that in period after the Olympics where he enjoyed the attention, he did all the adverts. Badminton was still obviously important, he was still doing pretty well, but I think there was a little bit of a down period. But then obviously earlier in this year, he probably was like, right, we started to build towards the World Championships. And like I said, I think he's someone that takes a little bit of time to get his game going, and now we're seeing the starts of that. Maybe has he peaked a bit early? Who knows? But I think he can obviously, once he gets to a level, I think he's obviously someone that could maintain that. So it's quite exciting. I think we're seeing a Kunlavut at the tail end of a good training block. One last thing I will say about Kunlavut Vitidsarn is whilst he is ranked world #1, he might lose that ranking, I think, after 1 week. I think if he doesn't defend his points in Indonesia and Chia is able to win the Indonesia Open, which obviously he's capable of doing, I think the world ranking #1 might go back to Chia. And on that note, I still think The best player in the world right now is Chia. He didn't have a great Singapore Open. Like I said, he lost to Wang in the first round. But one tournament doesn't make you a bad player. And we have to consider that up until that point, he has definitely been the world's best player all year. And has shown some fantastic form. And I think I still have Chia as the world #1, the best player in the world when he's at his absolute best. But Kunlavut is definitely showing some good signs here, and I think, like I said, I think he has one eye on the World Championships, and I think we are seeing the starts of him getting his level up to where it needs to be and his focus to where it needs to be for the Worlds. And yeah, he's done a three-peat with tournaments. He's won his last 3 tournaments. Can he make it a three-peat at the Worlds and make it 3 World Finals in a row? I know we're still quite away from it. It's, you know, still a couple of months away. But what do you think? Can he do that? We'll have to wait and see. But that's looking too far ahead. For now, congratulations to Kunlavut Vitidsarn, not on just the Singapore Open, but becoming the world #1. He is definitely my favourite men's singles player to watch. And I'm excited to see if he can get even better from where he is. That would be absolutely insane. Okay, so the World Tour Finals last year, Tse Ying Suet announced her retirement. It was her final tournament. It was a tearful goodbye from her. But then it transpired that that wasn't her last tournament, that it was going to be the Asia Championships. That was going to be her last dance. And what a last dance it was, as they won. Her and Chang won the title, playing absolutely brilliant badminton. But then I heard that that wasn't the end, that Tse Ying Suet had decided that I think the main reason she was going to retire was because her body, you know, she's had a number of injury issues over the years, especially with her knees, was just too much. But I think time away and getting those injuries under control and feeling a little bit better. And I think also I heard that Chang was very supportive of her. That after playing so well at the Asia Championships, that they decided that they were going to reform their partnership and come back. And they've done that at the Thai Open. They made their first comeback as a pair in international individual competition after those Asia Championships and reached the semi-finals. And this week they reached the final. So they're playing in Indonesia next week and they're in the top seed spot. Could they go one better and win at the tournament? That would be quite some progression. And actually, there's one thing that does go for them, other than the top Chinese mixed pairs not being there. Well, there's one, but yeah, anyway. And that is that the Astoria is a place that they've played quite well in before. It was actually the hall where they won their Asian Games silver, one of their best ever results. So what's to say that they can't continue that progression? Semi-final, first tournament back, final, next one, and then win. And I know I'm overlooking these championships, but just go with me. It fits what I'm saying. It fits the pattern. But yeah, can they do that? That would be absolutely fantastic. Now, that aside, it is really good to see them back. I think they bring this pair, Chang and Tse Ying Suet, bring a different flavour to the mixed doubles, not just being from a different country to everyone else. We don't see many Hong Kong pairs in the mixed doubles as of late, but just the way that they play and the way that they approach the game. There's loads of different styles and approaches to mixed doubles. It's one of the most varied disciplines in that respect, and they definitely bring their own style. I would call them quite limmy as a pair. In terms of, I say that because it looks like they're always just reaching for the shuttle, like they're always hitting the shuttle far away from them, like, you know, a relatively long swing, but it's just, I think being left-handed also, both of them being left-handed adds to that. I don't know how else to explain it, but it's like they're not very compact. Like you see some players have a very short, sharp technique. Theirs is very nice and fluid. It's quite nice to watch, especially Tse Ying Suet. She's got fantastic vision for the game. For me, when I watch her, there's a number of times where she looks like she's putting herself in weird positions, or that she might be kind of over committing to one side, you know, when she's defending something like this or like this. Sometimes she's miles over, but it seems to me that she has this kind of uncanny ability to kind of predict where the next shot's going. She's got that kind of nice vision for the game. She's always kind of stepping into the right place at the right time. She's not one of those players that's always pushing forward to the net. She's quite happy to move back and, You do see them rotate like almost like a men's doubles pair at times, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I think she has got a very keen eye for the mixed doubles, and that's something that I don't think can be taught. I think it can be improved upon with obviously good coaching and guidance, but it's something that I think you inherently have to be born with, and she certainly has that. And I think Tang Man as well. In terms of them as a pair, I think I remember hearing an interview with Tse Ying Suet, where she had said how much Tang Man had improved. I can't remember exactly what she said, but from what I can see, his movement around the court is a lot better. I think he's more patient, and he can set rallies up for Tse Ying Suet far more than he did in the past. It's not to say that he couldn't do it before, but I just think those areas have definitely improved. Obviously, this tournament in Singapore, they were able to reach the final, and they had a fantastic semi-final win over the All England champions Guo and Chen. That was just a really entertaining game, really, really exciting stuff. But in the final, they weren't quite able to bring that level, especially in the second game. The game ran away from them. There was a few mistakes creeping in, and also I think Dijapon and Supasara were incredibly solid in that second game. They didn't make a single mistake, and they had really set their game out. And I think it also didn't help them that second game they were playing from the faster ends. They weren't able to control their lifts as much, and Supasara and Dijapon were just pushing up. And Supasara is fantastic from the front court, one of the best players there at the moment. And we all know Dijapon's coverage around the mid-court and laterally is also one of the best, if not the best, in mixed doubles at the moment. But if we take that final win, the final away, it's still a fantastic tournament for this pair, and really cementing their return. And what a return they have. Like I said, Asia Championship win, Thailand semi-final, and now a final in Singapore. That's some consistent results right there. Just hope that, obviously, the issues with Tse Ying Suet in the past have been with her body falling apart a little bit. I think I saw a story from her after her semi-final where she was getting massaged, she had a knee tape, she had ice on her ankle. So yeah, no, obviously she's still going to have issues with body. I just hope that she's able to manage those well this time, and that we don't see any other major injuries for her. If she can do that, then obviously we can see this pair doing another Olympic cycle, in all honesty. Like we've seen from other pairs or players, some time away has done them absolutely the world of good. So yeah, no, great to see them back. Great to see Tse Ying Suet back. Chang obviously hasn't gone anywhere, but it's great to see this pair. They're definitely very exciting, and excited to see them play this week in Indonesia as well. Okay, so next, women's doubles, and this was won by Kim Hee-jong and Kong Hee-young of Korea. Now, what's very interesting about this is not only were Kim and Kong the first Korean pair to win this title in 34 years, it hadn't been done since 1991, but in 1991, one half of that pair, Tze Yong, is Kim Hee-jong's mother. Isn't that interesting? I found that absolutely fascinating. Really, really good, really, really cool. Another thing about this was that 6 years ago, in 2019, Kim and Kong were playing together, and they reached the final of the Singapore Open, but were defeated by a Japanese pair. So the fact that this year they were able to go one better, beating a Japanese pair, I think that's also pretty cool. The Japanese pair that they beat this time was Rin Iwanaga and Ki Nakanishi. They had a fantastic tournament. We haven't seen much of them this year, and I think that's due to an injury issue. I don't know who that's to, but hopefully that's in the rear view mirror now, and we can see more of this pair because they're really good. They showed what they are capable of and how good they can be in their semi-final win over the Olympic silver medalists and world number ones, Liu Shangshu and Tan Ning. They didn't just beat them, they took them apart with a really tactical masterclass. I think they've beaten Liu and Tan before, so they've kind of got the blueprint. And the main thing, I think Steen Pedersen was saying this, is that they were playing with a lot of flat, fast drives, and not giving the Chinese a lot of time, because the Chinese pair, they're strong physically, they've got good power, they attack well, they've got good game, but one weakness to them is their foot speed, not particularly quick. So if you can kind of dart them around the court nice and fast, and especially that's made it even more so prevalent in a hall with conditions like the Singapore Open, I think you can find gaps and find spaces, and they were able to do that brilliantly. And almost completely, I felt like the Chinese pair in the first half of both games were in it and looking very motivated and, you know, pumped up. But by not long into the second half, and the Japanese got a grasp on both games and were really twisting, you could almost see the Chinese go completely deflated in both games. And you don't see that too often in Chinese pairs. So yeah, absolutely fantastic from Rin and Ki. For the Koreans, they also beat a Chinese pair. They beat Zhang Shushan and Jia Yifan. And I think what they were able to do quite well in that game was they were able to isolate Zhang Shushan and take Jia Yifan out of the game really, really well. In terms of the final, because I do want to focus more on that, is I think what the difference was for me. It was quite a one-sided final in the end. And I think the Koreans, whereas the day before against Liu Shengshu and Tang Ning, that Nakanishi and Iwanaga were able to kind of go very fast and drive through the front player and give very little time with the rear court, they weren't quite able to. They were trying to do the same things, but they weren't able to get through the Korean pair at the front, especially Kim Hee-jong. She's a little bit faster on her feet than either of the Chinese pairs, and so as a result was able to intercept well. And what made it even more difficult, I think, for the Japanese pair was that Keng was hitting with far more variation and angle. If you can hit an angled smash, it's much harder to hit the flat drives or to have control in that area, and as a result it made Kim's job even easier at the front. Kim Hee-jong started the game incredibly nervously, but as the game progressed she became the best player on court. I think talking about Kim Hee-jong, another thing is that when I spoke about this pair, I can't remember in which episode, but I alluded to the fact that Kim Hee-jong doesn't have the biggest of attacks. She has a nice stop drop, and she can play obviously good variety, but she lacks that power. But I think that's really only kind of exposed in these slightly slower arenas. In a hall like the Singapore Open, where it's a lot faster, her foot speed and her power has obviously helped a little bit. It's not as exposed. And on top of this, I think also another thing that helps, and I did say this about Zhang Shushan and Jia Yifan last week, is that I think that this pair are relatively new. Although they've played together in the past, they're getting back used to each other, and they're starting to figure out patterns and starting to figure out, you know, if I smash here, they're starting to get a better know-how of where each of them is going to play and how they're going to set up their attacking options. And yeah, that was obviously at the forefront. That's something actually that the Japanese, who have played a lot longer together, consistently together, you can see that's where they really step up, because they're not the most powerful, but they're able to pinpoint their smashes or pinpoint their attacks and get their partner involved far more. That's something that I felt Kim and Keng was starting to show signs of doing far better in this tournament. And to be fair to Zhang Shushan and Jia Yifan, I felt last week they did that really well in Malaysia, and they were doing it well here. But obviously, you know, it wasn't to be for them at this tournament. Another thing I think about the Koreans that's improved, this was noticed by Steen and Jill, is that Keng Hee-jong, who was always, I think, more of the rear court player in her old partnership with Kim Tze Yong, she is developed and got far better at the front of the court. Now, this is actually a theme I think is actually running through doubles disciplines as a whole, both men's and women's. I think for pairs to be successful, now, I think the days of having a designated rear court player and front court player are almost over. You can still have pairs, obviously there can still be pairs that one player is better than the other, that's always going to be the case. But I don't think we're going to see pairs in both women's and men's where it's an out-and-out front player and an out-and-out rear player. I think there needs to be, if you're the rear player, they need to have a very good front court game. If they're the front court player, they need to develop their rear court game. It sounds like an obvious statement, but it's something that I think I've noticed over the last year or so, that more pairs in both men's and women's, the ones that are starting to do well, and this goes for the men's doubles, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, but if they've been in those definitive roles before, they developed it the other way around, the other skills, suddenly you're seeing far more success. Because it just gives you far more options and doesn't provide your opponent with an easier tactic or an obvious formation they can put you in to get easier and more opportunities, or to kind of take down to weaken your level. So yeah, I think Kim and Kong have definitely. Kim Hee-jong's still got, I think, some way to improve her rear court. I don't think it's ever going to be absolutely devastating, but Kong Hee-yong's definitely improved her front court. And I think when Kim's at the back, whilst I do think she could improve her back court more, I think her positioning of her attack and her variation is getting Kong involved more. And I think that's just going to happen because they're now starting to obviously, they just need a little more time to get back used to each other. And I think that goes for a few other pairs in the women's doubles discipline. So yeah, a fantastic win for Kim and Kong, and a great tournament for the Japanese pair as well. Like I said, we haven't seen much of them. Oh, sorry. Like I said, we haven't seen much of them this year. Hopefully we'll see more of them moving forward, because that's just another Japanese pair. The Japanese women's doubles, that's the one discipline that Japan, coming out the back end of all those changes that I mentioned earlier in this video, the women's doubles is the one that's come out the healthiest and looking the strongest, and having a pair like Iwanaga and Nakanishi playing like that is just adds to that. No, it wasn't the best final. Obviously, like most of the finals were, it was a little bit one-sided, but I think that shouldn't really take away from both pairs, especially the Japanese, from what a fantastic tournament they had. Yeah, no, I think I don't really need to say much more. I think I'll just be repeating myself if I do. So let's move on. Okay, so the last event, and this is the one that I think most people will be wanting me to talk about, and that's the men's doubles. More specifically, I want to talk about Aaron Chia and Tze Ying, because what a period this pair have been having. You know, it's four tournaments in a row that they've reached the final, and 3 back-to-back in this Asia leg. So they, you know, Thailand, Malaysia Masters and the Singapore, and of those 3 of the 3 weeks back-to-back, they've won 2 of them. So they won in Thailand, they got the runner-up in the Malaysia Masters, and they won the Singapore Open. An absolutely fantastic achievement. I must say, like I alluded to with the Chinese mixed doubles, having played both 500s before the 750-1000s, I had some worries over the Malaysian pair. Would they be able to maintain their intensity? You know, would they feel a little bit mentally fatigued or physically fatigued? But any of those doubts were squashed pretty much immediately, because from first round through to the final, their intensity kept going up and up and up. Absolutely brilliant. I do think they were helped by the crowd. Obviously, being in Singapore, it was almost like a home event for the Malaysians, and that definitely helped them. But I think even if it wasn't, just the intensity, it was absolutely amazing to watch. And, you know, they were thoroughly well-deserved champions in the end. Obviously, in the final, it was a very hotly anticipated final, because it saw Aaron Chia and Tze Ying go up against the All England champions and the other top pair in the world right now. So it was a final between arguably the 2 best pairs in men's doubles at the moment, and that was Kim Won-ho and Seo Seung-jae. I did a post on this on Instagram the night before the final, and I felt that you know, the Malaysians, the key to this match, as it had been for all men's doubles, was being able to push up the court and get the attack. And I felt the Malaysians might be able to get the attack a little bit more from the Koreans, just because they're a little bit more that way inclined. But I had question marks, and could the Malaysians break down the Koreans' incredibly solid defence? I also felt that the service situation would be incredibly important, because if there's ever a weakness in the Korean pair, I felt that it's the service situation. When they come against pairs that are really good in the first 4 shots, the Koreans can come a little unstuck. It's not like they're not bad. It's not like they're bad in that situation, but just the pairs that have beaten them this year or got very close to them are usually pairs that were very good at that situation. So I thought with Aaron Chia, the way that he'd been serving and playing, and also Tze Ying as well throughout this tournament, throughout Singapore, they've been playing the service situation incredibly well. Something I think that Indonesian coach Harry IP has definitely instilled more in them. I felt that could actually be quite decisive. But having said that, in the first game of this final, it seemed that, in all honesty, that the Malaysians actually were a little bit flat, especially Aaron Chia. Actually, for the first game and a half, I would say that. You know, there was a lot of service situations. I noticed Aaron Chia was serving in at Seo Seung-jae, say in here, and then not capitalising on the return, or he would say it just wasn't quite as sharp as it was before. And Aaron Chia was also looking a little bit flat in general, I think, for the first game. I'm not sure whether he was feeling a little bit mentally fatigued, or it just was, whatever it was, I don't know. But he just wasn't quite lifting his game as much, and the Koreans were capitalising on it. But it's here where I think the main thing happened, and I think the biggest change, and something that I want to kind of more focus on this section for, and that is I want to really heavily praise Tze Ying. Now, Tze Ying, for me, I think a couple of things, and it was mentioned throughout the tournament. His intensity was the driving factor. It was the same last week and the week before then. Aaron Chia was fist pumping, but Tze Ying was really giving it some. Very highly motivated every single point. You could see in his face how determined. There was not one point where he relinquished his energy and his intensity, and I think that was quite key in this final. The other thing is that an area where he's massively improved is his front court. He's become far more positive from there. He's playing more attacking shots. He's finishing rallies. He's able to challenge the best net players in the world quite consistently. And like I alluded to in the last section, that's something that I think all doubles pairs across men's and women's need to do if they want to have better results, if they want to kind of push on, is that development of a player in their not such good situation, in their weaker position. So for Tze Ying, he's developed his front court really well. So I think those two things combined, Tze Ying's front court play and also his intensity, I think did help Aaron Chia. And it's quite funny, after the match, after the Malaysians had won. Now, so I am jumping ahead a little bit here, but you'll see where I'm going with this. Aaron Chia was asked what's the key to their recent success, or the key to the success in this tournament. And the first words that Aaron Chia said was trust. And as soon as he said that, it confirmed what I was thinking, and what I was thinking of when I was watching this final. Because I've obviously, as you might know, I'm doing a video on the daddies. And so I've been watching a lot of their interviews, a lot of their matches. And I was watching that final, and I immediately was thinking of an interview I saw with Mohammed Hassan, who was asked a question along the same lines as that one. What was the key to your success with Hendra Setty? And Hassan didn't say the word trust, but he said support. So in essence, saying the same thing. And then he elaborated further and said that if one of them was having a bad day, or was a bit low on energy, or if one of them was injured, which happened a lot to the daddies, the other player, the partner, wouldn't wilt away, or wouldn't give in, or go, okay, it's just not our day today. The other player would try even harder, would support and come in to help. And so many times they said that when they did that, the other player would rise a little bit, and that would be the reason for the success. And that everyone, is what Tze Ying did in this final. Period. Okay? Aaron Chia, it wasn't like he was playing badly, but he definitely looked a little flat. He wasn't taking advantage of certain service situations that he created, that he was doing so well earlier in the tournaments and at the previous tournaments, and his energy just seemed a little low, making a few errors here and there. Tze Ying noticed that and upped his game. He decided to serve and look for the third shot much more. He took control of the front court, he brought the intensity, and as a result, if you notice from like the second half of the second game, Aaron Chia suddenly got lifted by this. Then we started to see Aaron Chia doing the same sort of serves, that serve into Tze Ying, and then come in and take it on. And for me, that was absolutely key in their victory. It was still a very hard-fought match. The Koreans weren't going to roll over. Tze, on that topic, I think Tze was trying to do the same thing with Kim Won-ho, because Kim Won-ho wasn't having the best day, and Tze was playing some absolutely sublime stuff, some really inspired play, and I think he was trying to do that for Kim Won-ho. So it was quite interesting that I noticed it from both, but it was so good to see, and I really want to give a huge amount of credit to Tze Ying for that, because I think had he not brought that level of intensity, I think the Malaysians would have lost in 2 games, because a set and a half they were down, and then from that point on, even the match kind of changed. And yeah, I thought it was quite fitting that the match was won by Tze Ying at the front of the court. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Really good. Obviously, part of that trust and that support, as Mohammed Hassan also said in his interview, extends to the coach, And funnily enough, it's the same coach, Harry IP. A lot of people have asked me what influences Harry had, and I'll answer that question now. I think Harry is obviously a very good tactician. I think he is probably given this pair so much more confidence in themselves, allowing them to play the way they are. They've always been a very skillful pair, especially Aaron Cha, but I always felt that they were a little bit more defensive. I think I alluded to this in the last episode, or it might have been in Thailand, that Malaysian pairs tend to get a little bit defensive, but that's definitely not the case. They're being more attacking, they're playing more adventurous, but still holding the essence of what is them. And I think them knowing that there's a guy behind the court that not only knows what he's talking about, but is there and supporting them and giving them all this kind of inspiration and motivation. It's just a big part of that. Like I said, it encompasses that whole trust and support system. And you can see that in all their social media posts. That I think is a big reason as to why they've been having this kind of success. Now, big question mark. Can they do it for a 4th time in a row at the Indonesia Open? I would personally, I'd like to say I have my doubts. I think also it's going to be tricky because playing in Indonesia, the crowd aren't going to be as on their side to lift them when they might need it. But from what I've seen, I'm sure they're very highly motivated within themselves. And I think actually, if I look at their draw, it's not easy because the first match they got Chia and Sogard again. And then they got a second round against possibly either Maulana and Kanando or Rankireddy and Shetty. And then another possible quarterfinal against their compatriots, Man and T, who they beat in the quarterfinals in Singapore. One or two things going for them is that I think the bottom half, there in the top half, is a little bit tougher because you've got Ashton Rasmussen, Alfin Yardianto, Kim Won-ho and Sosin Jae, and Liang and Wang in that half. So they'll probably be quite glad to avoid them before the final. But yeah, no, it's going to be very interesting to see if they can maintain that energy and maintain it for a 4th week in a row. Even if they are not too physically fatigued, mentally it's difficult to raise yourself again. But they showed in Singapore that they can do it. Who's to say they can't do it in Indonesia? It would be an absolute achievement if they were to do that, to win reach 4 finals in a row, like week to week. Not just like you reach 2 finals, you have a break, reach 2 finals. 4 back to back to back to back. That would be absolutely incredible. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. That would be absolutely amazing. So yeah, no, it was a really good final, this one. The last thing I'll say, it was a really good final. We kind of saved the day because finals day was very underwhelming. At the Singapore Open, all first 4 finals were very one-sided, both all in straight games. This one had everything, had the great play from both pairs. For me, it was the great dynamic that So Yik was trying to raise Aaron Cha, and Sosin Jae was trying to raise Kim Won-ho. You obviously had great attacking play from the Malaysians. The Koreans obviously attacking well, but both pairs can defend really well. There was a lot of interesting little battles going on, obviously in conditions like that, pushing up the court, trying to take the initiative. That always leads to me to very exciting men's doubles, very tense and tetchy. And obviously it was 19 in the third, very close, and really exciting stuff. It was definitely one of the matches of the tournament. I don't think it was my favourite match of the tournament. I'm not actually sure which match I'd give that to, but it was definitely in the top 3. But yeah, no, huge congratulations again to the Malaysian pair. Thoroughly deserved winners. And let's see if they can do it again in Indonesia. Q&A. Thank you again as always. I think this week, I'm not sure if it's because it's a Super 750, but I've had so many more questions than last week, the last 2 weeks actually. Probably more than those 2 weeks combined. So I'm going to try and answer a few of them. Having won 3 World Tour titles and the Asian Badminton Championships, and now world number 1, is Vitidsarn the current best player? I did kind of answer that when I was talking about Kunlavut Vitidsarn. And whilst he's my favourite player, and I think technically the best player in the men's singles, that's just my opinion, I actually do think Chia is still the best player in the world right now. If you go on form throughout the whole of 2025, and I think top level game, like if all players are absolutely firing at their best, I think Chia is the best player in the world right now. He didn't have a great Singapore Open, but like we always say, one bad result doesn't make a bad player, and you have to kind of, if you go back a little bit more and you watch some of his previous tournaments, the way he's been playing, he's been absolutely brilliant. I think Kunlavut is closing the gap. It's not like best Kunlavut versus best Chia. Kunlavut can't win. We saw Kunlavut beat Chia at the Olympic Games when the pressure was really on. But I think, if I hand on heart, I do still think Chia is the best player in the world. And I do think the way the rankings are, I think he could take back that ranking even as soon as this week. I think if he's able to win and Kunlavut can't defend his points, I think he got semi-final last year, I think the rankings might reverse. But yeah, I do think overall I would still have Chia as the world #1, and Kunlavut, I think #2 is a pretty good place for him to be. So yeah. Okay, next question. Liang, Keng and Wang Chan, what is happening? Now, in the last episode, I was quite scathing of their performance. They lost Hoki Kobayashi incredibly easily. And I said, like, their serves was bad. They didn't seem to have much focus, a lot of errors, not much of a game plan, and just were a little bit out of it, a little bit all over the place. And that seemed to be spilling over into this week in Singapore, because I was keeping a very keen eye on them to see if they could turn it around, to see if they can deliver the kind of performances that we know they're capable of. And it seemed that that wasn't going to be the case. They lost the opening game against a Japanese pair in the first round and really were completely out of it, in all honesty. Wasn't particularly good. And I think they were able to win that match mainly because I think the Japanese pair started to go off the boil themselves. Don't know why, they just started to make a lot of mistakes. I didn't think it was that the Chinese started to play that much better. Maybe they reduced their error rates a little bit, but it wasn't the Chinese winning it. I thought that was more the Japanese losing it. Now, Wang and Liang were able to make it to the quarterfinals, where they lost a close 2-game match to Sir Sun Jae and Kim Won Ho, the pair that got to the final. And I actually thought in that match they played much better. For me, I felt that Wang Chan was actually playing very well. He was absolutely brilliant at the front of the court. He was creating a lot of chances and finishing points and kind of taking over. For me, Liang Keng, who's, I think most people see him as the slightly weaker link in the pair. In the past, I've always said that he's the one that when things get a little bit tight and tetchy, that he suffers the most. And I think that he was a little bit, for me, forgettable in that quarterfinal, would be my best way of putting it. I said this to my wife. I said, if I had AI technology and I could superimpose, at one point, superimpose another Chinese player onto Liang Keng, would you even notice? Because Wang Chan was the one that your eyes were always drawn to. Now, he is a little bit more stylish and skillful, but in that match, he was the one that was doing pretty much all the legwork. And Liang Keng was kind of, obviously, hitting shuttles and, thundering smashes, but my eyes never really fixated on him. They always were drawn to Wang Chan. So I think if you could switch him out at some random point, you wouldn't notice it right away. There's still, the one thing that's really good that I did notice is there's still, like, Wang Chan's a bit of an aloof kind of guy. And sometimes, and I think that kind of rubs off on Liang Keng. Sometimes we've seen them look almost like they don't care. That's probably the wrong way to put it, but sometimes that comes across that way. But in this match and in this tournament, even in the first round when it wasn't going, they were still, clapping, high-fiving and giving it some, really kind of showing that they want to win. They really want to do well. It's not like they're just going through the motions. I just think things aren't quite working for them. But obviously, they were this close to actually, they could have easily won that match against Kim Won Ho and Seo Sun Jae. It was both an extra point, so you mean at that stage it could have gone either way. And had they reached the semi-finals and has possibly moved on and reached, if they got through that match, maybe we'd be having a different conversation here. And I think that brings up an interesting point, an interesting thing. And the reason why I wanted to pick this is that the winners of this tournament and the ones that have been playing so well in this Asia leg, Aaron Chia and Seo Yik. If you go back to the All England, which isn't that long ago, it's in March, where they lost, I think, in the first round, people were kind of going, what's happening to this pair? What's happened to them? They're not doing very well, all this kind of stuff, and, whatever, there was injury issues, other issues, whatever. How quickly your perspective of someone or a pair can change. And I think, for me, yes, I've spoken about what the Malaysians have improved upon, but you don't make those improvements, like, overnight. Those things don't happen. They've probably been bubbling away, and suddenly they're surfacing. And I think Liang Keng and Wang Chan are just 1 or 2 wins or good results away from suddenly being this pair that you're like, yeah, they can do, you know, they could go win Indonesia, or maybe not, or then come back to the next leg in Japan and China, do really well, do well at the Worlds, and suddenly we'll be sat here at the end of the year going, wow, good are they? They're like one of the best players in the world right now. They've got that capability. They could become that very quickly. I don't think they've been playing brilliantly, but signs in Singapore, especially their quarter-final, and I think their second round match as well in Singapore, there were signs that it was a little bit better. Now, the opposite could be true, and I think a lot of people are saying this because they were so good and so exciting, obviously Olympic silver medalists, and since then, we haven't really seen much of them. I'm not even sure they've been in a final since then, have they? But I'm just saying, it's overnight, a pair or player could get one or two results that suddenly the way you look at them can suddenly change. And that goes throughout all of men's doubles, all of badminton, basically. I think definitely in the men's events, because it's so open. I really do think it's open. Obviously, we do get at periods we have top pairs, top players, but all the other players on pairs below those top few are capable of getting a couple of good results and switching it. I spoke about Hoki and Kobayashi earlier in this video. They haven't been getting great results. I know they've had injury issues, whereas Wang, Chang and Liang haven't. But I feel like they could easily, they're knocking on the door. I saw signs that they could suddenly become a pair that suddenly go, oh wow, they're doing really well. They're like one of the best pairs in the world right now. They could do what Chia and Tze Yong have done. And I think the Chinese are capable of doing that as well. That's just the nature of the beast. But yeah, what is happening? I think it's difficult to really say. I don't know obviously what's going on behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff. But I think in Singapore, one positive, or a couple of positives, is Wang Chang was playing really well. I think he's doing a bit too much work. I think Liang Keng needs to step up a little bit for them to... I think if he does a little bit, actually, if Liang Keng just increases his game by 5%, more than what he's capable of that. He doesn't need to improve 5%. He just needs to deliver 5-10% more of what we know he's capable of. With the way that Wang Chan's been playing, they could start doing well and winning tournaments again. I genuinely believe that. But yeah, no, I don't know what's going behind the scenes, what's causing all this, but there's definitely... I saw some slight positive signs in that Singapore Open quarter-final. Let's see if they can take that forward into Indonesia, or actually probably maybe even further on. But we'll have to see. Obviously, you know, with all of these kind of things, you're never quite sure when it's going to happen, but I'm not sure there needs to be changes in the pairs for China, for this pair. I think they need to give them a little bit more time. They're still quite young, and I still think they should be given a little bit more time together. Maybe if China wants to switch any pairs, they can do it amongst the lower ones. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, I think that answers that question. Okay, last question. Can Chen Yufei take back her world #1 spot by the end of this year? Now, I don't know if it's actually even possible. I think what it would take is Tze Yong either not playing tournaments, obviously, or losing early, so not defending points that she had from last year, and Chen Yufei continuing the way that she is. So I think those two things are going to be quite tough to happen. I would probably say unlikely, more so the first one than the second one. I think Tze Yong is still going to be winning a lot of tournaments, or at least reaching the final, and I think it's going to take a lot from Chen Yufei to kind of take over the #1 spot. You know how far ahead Tze Yong is. I think she can become world #2, and possibly, even though ranked #2, could possibly be seen as the world's best player, especially if she gets a few more wins against Tze Yong and is able to win the world title. I think if she can do both those things, then even if she isn't #1, I think people can see her as #1. But I think it is going to be difficult. For me, I've already spoken about the match at length, but I think Tze Yong had a bit of a bad day, and she acknowledged that, and she said in the last bit of her interviews that she's going to use this as motivation to come back even better, even stronger. And so someone like this, Tze Yong, is only going to motivate her to train harder. And so I personally can't see Tze Yong being overtaken as world #1 by the end of the year. I think it's highly unlikely. I think if it is even possible. But I can foresee Chen Yufei being the #2, and those two players being seen as, you know, the clear top two players in the world. And I do think below them we're going to have Han Yue and Wang Zi as 3-4. I think it's more likely that we're going to see 3 Chinese players in the top 4 than Chen Yufei as world #1. But like I said, it's not like if I say that Chen Yufei might not be seen as the #1 player. It's just the actual ranking of world #1. I think is going to be unlikely. Anyway, guys, I have spoken for one hell of a long time. I'm not sure how much is going to get cut, but I have actually been speaking for 2 hours right now. There was so much to talk about. I think a lot of it will get cut. There was a lot of me rambling, as always. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Obviously, if there's anything I've missed out, or you think you disagree with, or you agree with, that's what the comment section's for. Keep it respectful, though. I'm happy to get in discussions with people and to comment back. You know that I do that. But yes, as long as we keep it respectful and not light-hearted, but, you know, nice, then all is good. Again, if you want any of the Beckman's Breakdown merchandise, click the link in my description. Next week is the Indonesia Open, the Super 1000, the big one. Really excited to watch that. And obviously, I will be back here next week to give you my thoughts on it. So yeah, until then, everyone, see you next time.